the Ammach Project. That hurt your
Hello, and we're here in sunny Arizona at the 22nd International UFO Conference, and we're here with my guest, Stan Romanek. Absolutely delighted to meet Stan. This is the first time I've read his book, but I want to hear a lot more. So Stan, over to you. Welcome to the Ammach Project.
Well, thank you for having me.
So Stan, I understand that your experiences began back in 2000, would that be right?
Technically, they really began when I was a child, but yes, they began in 2000.
Let's go back to the childhood experiences, because I really don't remember those from your writing. So let's go back over those for the
Well, I grew up in the
viewers.
military. My father was had top secret clearance in the Air Force, and he was in charge or did something with missiles in the late 60s, early 70s. And in 1968, my father was involved in an incident where a UFO came down and armed, not disarmed, but armed one of the missiles at Minot missile base.
I haven't heard of that one before.
A lot of people haven't, but it's out there.
So just remind me the time again, 68, did you say?
1968, yes, 1968.
Actually armed it?
Armed it, yes. I was 5 years old at the time.
Okay.
Now, they tracked this UFO from Minot to Grand Forks, then from Grand Forks to our small town in Northwood, North Dakota, where we were living at the time. We didn't live on base. And I remember when I was little, a strange woman approached me, and very stunned. Even as a child, I thought she was very pretty.
Yeah.
Except her eyes were bizarre. She had very huge, almond-shaped, so large, they didn't fit. Her eyes were so large, they didn't fit. And they were so blue, they were almost violet eyes.
And where was she? Where were you when you met her?
I was outside playing. I had this little pedal car that I was playing with, this little metal pedal car. And she walked up the street, up the sidewalk, and she ruffled my hair and she said, "You know, you're very special. You have something very important to do when you grow up." And I remember she opened the palm of her hand and she had this marble, this blue glowing marble that started to float about a quarter inch off the palm of her hand. And just as she did that, I heard my mother yelling out the kitchen window at me, saying, "Stan, what are you doing?" And I turned around, and my mother was coming out the door because a strange woman had approached me.
Yeah.
And the woman, when I turned around, the woman was already, halfway up the sidewalk, walking away. And at the time, I didn't realize there was any connection until 2000, jump ahead to 2000. I had my first UFO sighting. And I met this woman online. She's now my wife, but we became very good friends, and I wanted her to come visit me in Colorado. She lived in Nebraska, and I lived in Colorado, and I thought, I'm going to go up to the mountains of Colorado, videotape the area, send her some chocolates and a bottle of wine or some little care package. And on my way to videotape, the mountains, there were cars pulled over the side of the road, approximately 30 to maybe 50 cars pulled off to the side of the road.
Yeah.
And they were looking south above some power lines. And as I'm driving, I'm looking to see what they're looking at. I thought at first it was a hot air balloon, and realized it was actually a UFO. And I had my video camera, got it out, because I didn't believe in this stuff, and I'm pretty sure.
Yes, I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I actually captured something so I could show people to say, hey, look, I had this government experiment captured on film, because I really didn't believe in UFOs.
So can I, just before we go further into that story, can I just take you back to your childhood?
Sure.
So had you, from that time, since you were 5 years old, back in 68,
yes.
Are we in 68 with the lady?
Yeah.
Okay, was there anything that came out from that incident, any further experiences?
I realized she had followed me. She showed up again throughout my life.
I wondered that.
She showed up again when I was, first when I was 5, then when I was 8, then when I was 10.
And was it always in the same sort of situation where you were on your own without your parents?
Always. No, actually, she showed up. I remember my father was transferred from the missile base in North Dakota to Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I remember we were Christmas shopping or something, or looking for Christmas wrapping or boxes, or I'm not sure. And there was a woman that seemed to be following us a lot down there. And
do you remember her as the same woman that
well,
you've seen?
I remembering her from somewhere.
Right.
And she wore glasses, which I thought was odd because it was snowing outside, but she wore sunglasses.
Oh, okay.
And we were about to get into the car, and I was having a temper tantrum because I wanted to go home. I didn't want to go. I thought I was really bored and tired and wanted to go home. And I remember my parents had an old Studebaker, and the seats pushed forward so you could get into the back, to the back of the car. And my mother was sitting down and leaning forward so we could get in the back of the car. My sister was already getting back in the car, and my mom was yelling at me because I was just being a brat. And this woman came up and she says, what a wonderful, wonderful little boy you have. And my mom looked at this woman going, really? Because I was having a temper tantrum. And, I remember she took off her sunglasses, and my mother's reaction was like, oh my God.
Really?
This is not, Did
you see that?
Yeah, I remember that specifically, and I remember thinking, those are really strange eyes, but as a child, you don't put two and two together.
I mean, did your dad see that as well?
Oh, yeah. And then I remember thinking, I know this woman from somewhere, but I couldn't remember from where. And, my mother just jokingly, after she got over the shock of seeing this really bizarre-looking woman, said, yeah, well, we're thinking of giving him away, because I was, of course, being horrible. Being horrible. And the woman goes, well, if you're giving him away, I'll take him. Serious. I thought she sounded serious, and I'm going, oh my God, my parents are really going to give me away. So I calm down really quickly, and my mom just goes, well, I think, guess we got to keep him. And then I remember seeing her again when I was 10.
And again, what were those circumstances?
I was on the swim team, and our house was adjacent to a park. And this park had a public swimming pool and a playground.
Yeah.
And I went up there early to practice. I was the only one up there, waiting for the rest of the people to come up to open the pool so I could practice. And I was literally laying on my belly, dragging my hands and feet in the sand, laying on the swing set. Yeah. And I hear somebody walking up the bike path or the path. And this woman sat 2 swings down from me. And I'll never forget this because she was asking me these really bizarre questions. You know, she started out, "Are you having a good day?" Yes. And
did you recognize her at this point?
I didn't look up. I wasn't
okay.
looking up. It was later it was later that I looked up, and she says, are they feeding you okay? Are they taking good care of you? And I'm thinking, who's she talking? And she was, talking about my parents.
Yeah.
Are you eating well? And, do you like swimming? And then she said something really bizarre. I'm seriously dyslexic, and I never really had a very good time in school. I didn't like school. I was bullied a lot because people thought I was, not very bright.
Yeah.
Which turned out to be the exact opposite, thank goodness. But she goes, I understand you're having problems in school, but don't worry, things will get better.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm thinking, who is this bizarre woman? And I look up and she's wearing sunglasses, and she takes her sunglasses off. It's like, I know this woman from somewhere.
And are you now remembering that you've seen
and
her
I'm
a few
starting
times?
to remember that I've seen her from someplace. And she looked at me and she said, you have something very important to do. You're one of us. We're one of you. And when she said that, her mouth wasn't moving. And it scared me so bad. I ran all the way home and told my parents I didn't want to go swimming. And I tried to explain what happened, and they grounded me for lying. They said, if you don't want to be on the swim team, just tell us. Don't make up this cockamamie story. And I wasn't making up the story.
Yeah.
And so that was a start of something amazing.
Right, so was 10 the last time you would have seen this lady?
I actually saw her again, and without giving the plot away that's in my book, she ends up being related somehow. So it's really quite amazing.
And what about, you said you have a sister. Is it just one sibling you have, or do you have others?
I have a sister and I have 2 brothers.
And have they had any experiences?
They have. My brother had experiences, oddly, until he had a vasectomy, and then it stopped. But my sister still has some experiences, but not really. It quit a few years ago. But mine continue. And apparently it's a genetic thing.
Yes, I've heard this in families. What about your parents?
My parents, I have no idea. My father won't talk about it. I recently learned, and it wasn't that long ago, about a year ago, that I found out my mother actually had top secret clearance also.
Oh, really? On what basis?
She worked for a place called Rocky Flats, which made nuclear triggers and bioweapons and stuff like that. But I was told she worked for the Corps of Engineers. I later found out that was just a cover. And so, and then a few years prior to that, I found out I was part of a project called Project Preserve Destiny. I believe I was. Can I prove it? Not really, but...
Just tell us about that, Stan, because I've heard of it, but it escapes me, the detail.
Well, there's a book by a gentleman by the name of Dan Burish, and it's it's a book called Above Black.
Yeah.
And my wife noticed these amazing similarities, and eventually, I got in contact with this gentleman and find out that everybody was at the same bases, the same times, the same years.
Oh, really?
And it's a rather interesting book, and I don't want to give his, because if I tell you exactly all about it, then I'll give his book away too.
That's fine. So I mean, people can look up that.
They can look up that.
Exactly,
Preserve Destiny. You bet.
So there's all kinds of different elements that are feeding in here. So have you spoken much about it to your brothers and sisters?
I have. I talked to them quite a bit, especially considering my sister, had some pretty... in fact, my first abduction experience happened with my sister. We had an apartment together, with my sister in the same apartment. So, and oddly enough, when you have an abduction experience and the media gets a hold of it, they always try to tell you it's sleep paralysis.
Oh, I know. Yeah, we're familiar with
The
that
trouble
story.
is, my abduction experience happened when I was fully awake. Somebody knocked at the door, fairly early in the morning. It was about 2:30 in the morning, and they must have been knocking for a long time because it woke me up. And when I went to go answer the door, there were these 3 beings standing there. Okay. And then I remembered everything,
Yeah. Okay, so I know we've covered that bit, but let's just go back now to you know, the first time, you know, when you were in Nebraska, you were taking the pictures and you saw the UFO, and we'll just come forward again and just cover that incident as well.
You're talking about the first UFO experience.
Yeah, you were.
I was trying to get my girlfriend to come visit me from Nebraska to Colorado, so I was in Colorado when this happened. And I was driving along, you know, I actually went the back roads up to the mountains, and I found a perfect spot. It was December 27th, 2000. Beautiful winter day, really warm out, very sunny. I was real excited. And I noticed these cars had pulled over, and I thought, well, that's an odd place for cars to pull over just in the middle of the road. Yeah. And I thought, you know, maybe there was a crash, maybe there's a lot of animals up there, maybe it was a bighorn sheep or an elk or a deer or something. But they were looking up. And I'm driving along, and I'm trying to see what they were looking at. And as I got closer, I'm looking at this odd shape, and it's not your typical shaped UFO. It's not this dish-shaped UFO. It's looked like it had a sphere on top with 6 smaller rotating spheres underneath it.
Well, what color was it?
It was silver. It was, you know, like a kind of a dull silvery color.
Was it what kind of size?
Approximately, I'd say 30 foot in diameter, 30, 40 foot in diameter. It wasn't small.
No.
And so I'm watching this thing thinking, oh my God, that hot air balloon is going to crash into the power lines. Yeah. Because it was about 50 feet above the power lines, and it looks like
so really near.
Yeah, it looks like it was coming closer. So I'm going, oh my God, you know, what am I going to do? But as I got closer, I'm looking in between those spheres underneath this UFO. It was the blackest black I'd ever seen in my life. There is nothing on this planet that even compares to the void of light that was in between these spheres. And I'm thinking, what is that? I started to kind of get a little scared. I was a little frightened. And I realized then that what I was looking at was actually a UFO. And
before this time, as you said before, you didn't really believe in anything
I didn't believe in that. In fact, even then, even up until, you know, maybe a few months after my abduction experience, I still had a hard time.
Right.
I blew it off as being some kind of military experiment. While we sat there, I pulled over. It got really creepy because I drove past it, and the thing was like this, hovering above the power lines, but as I drove past it, it tilted forward and started pacing my van.
Oh, right.
And I'm thinking, you know, this is really bizarre. And then I realized I had my video camera with me. And so I got my I pulled over, rolled down the window, and right when I did that, it seemed to notice that I rolled down the window, reorientated itself, and literally shot to about 1,000 foot in a matter of a millisecond. And I grew up in the, you know, on Air Force bases. I know what sonic booms are. I know what sonic, you know, those sonic booms are. And there was a small sonic boom that made everybody, you know, made my shirt vibrate. And eventually it hovered there for a while, corkscrewed away, and about 10 minutes later, 2 F-16s flew over us in the direction that the UFO went. So
you got some footage for your girlfriend?
Oh, let me tell you, and I told her what happened, and I apologized. I told her what I was going to do, but I was kind of frightened, and I really didn't know if I should tell her. I didn't want her to think I was crazy. Luckily, she believed in this stuff, and I didn't.
Oh, did she?
Because that came in handy later on after I started having more and more and more experiences.
So let's forward to perhaps when you've had some more encounters then, Stan, coming forward in time. So you've had these sightings in 2000.
Yes.
And then what was the next major event?
I had some business in Pennsylvania, and my best friend, I decided to drive out there. I didn't want to fly. I didn't have the money really to.
Are we still in 2000?
This was 2001. Right. And I drove to Pennsylvania with my friend, and on the way there, we went up Interstate 80. Yeah. And then we picked up my girlfriend, and we all drove to Pennsylvania. Well, we had thought we saw something on the way into Pennsylvania, right at the border of Pennsylvania and Ohio, I think it was. And I kind of blew it off. I didn't see it. My girlfriend saw it. My friend saw it. It's like, whatever. You guys are crazy. On the way back, though, Lisa saw it again. And this time we got up narco. She goes, oh my God, it's a giant disc. So this thing was actually in front of us and preceded us through 2.5 states. It was following us basically. Every time, and we had, I brought my video camera. We had video cameras and cameras with us anyhow because of the trip. Every time we pulled over to get a shot of it, it went into a cloud. It dove it. We watched it. We pulled over.
So it was avoiding
and
you.
As soon as I got out of the car, we watched it go into a cloud.
Yeah.
As soon as I got on the road again, it came out, and we were,
And was this a first for Lisa? Had she seen?
No, this was a first, and definitely, not a first for me, but the way it was, and I got scared. I really did. I got scared because I knew there was something up, and so we were really scaring the heck out of Lisa because both me and my friend Mark, who is actually here with us, were hanging out the window, 80 miles an hour, going down Interstate 80. With our video cameras pointing up at this thing. So we got a little bit of footage of it anyhow.
Yeah.
And that just went from there. Everything went crazy.
So what was the sort of craziness that ensued? Was it mainly the increase in sightings? Or
It started out with the increase in sightings. And then...
I mean, how was that affecting you, personally, your sleep, your behaviors?
Oh, yeah. Well, at that time, not really. But whatever happened to me along the way seemed to affect me electromagnetically, which is typical of abductees. They have, I don't know if it's, the things, the implants that they're supposedly found with, but I started affecting anything electrical. Computers, I couldn't work on computers. Oh, yeah. I couldn't work on computers. I'd walk under street lights. In fact, one of the producers that I was that wanted to do a documentary on me, videotaped me walking under street lights, and every street light I'd walk under would go out.
Yeah, I've heard of those.
Hotel card keys, I couldn't hold on to hotel card keys. I wipe them. Watches, even to this day, I have to have a wind-up watch because I burn out watches.
Yeah.
So it's.
So let's just go back to sort of the chronology of the event. So in those earlier days, sort of 2000, you're having sightings. Was there anything other than that happened in those earlier days?
In the earlier days, sightings, I started being followed. I thought I was just being paranoid, but I started being followed by unmarked cars. And I found out that my phones were tapped.
And with these vans or cars that were following you, would you ever see any of the occupants?
Oh, sure. You bet I'd approach them.
Oh, right.
Oh, you bet I'd approach them and they'd drive off. You bet. I mean, they always had dark windows, so I couldn't really get a good look. But
and what were the vans like? Were they ordinary vans or vehicles?
Sometimes there were black SUVs, either black SUVs or white sedans of some type, like a Ford Taurus or something like that. And they never had license plates on them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, did you complain to the police about being followed or anything?
I did, and they just kind of blew it off like this guy's a nutter. Yeah. So, that he's just crazy.
So how would that observation go? Would they be sitting outside your house, or would they be tailing you?
I would be driving along, and I'd notice a car just following me everywhere I went. Yeah. It got to the point where I'd drive around in the parking lot, and they'd follow me. I'd go out this way, go out that way, and they'd follow me. We made a game of it.
And was that from right early on, when you were having the sightings?
Not really. That happened a little bit later, not from the very beginning. It really happened after my abduction experience, after my first abduction experience.
Okay, well, let's go to that abduction experience. When was the first one?
September of 2001. I had, and this is when, see what makes my case so different, what people don't understand is most of the stuff that happens only happens with a lot of people around. And I'm talking in some situations, hundreds if not thousands of people around. I was managing a store, a retail store, and I just let my last customers out. And it was about 7 o'clock in the evening. It was rush hour, and the store was situated right at a corner of a very busy intersection.
And where are we at this point?
This was in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado. And they came running back, and they were knocking on the door. They said, "There's something above your work. There's something above your work." And I thought somebody had climbed on the building and was messing around on the roof.
Yeah.
And so I went outside to look, and there was this, again, 30, 40 foot diameter, perfectly round sphere, blinking red sphere, about 200 feet hovering above my work. And so I'm thinking, well, that is a really bizarre balloon. The only trouble is we had, 30, 40 mile an hour wind gusts that evening coming, from the mountains, and that thing was just solid. Stationary. And so all these people were watching this thing, and I'm sitting there watching it, and eventually it kind of drifted off and went away, and I locked up the store, and I got in my car because I was kind of scared after all the stuff that I experienced, and I, drove home. On my way home, I see this blinking object again, and it looked like at first it was coming toward me, but I realized it was actually hovering above my apartment complex.
Right.
Now, my best friend and my sister were waiting for me. We were going to go out to dinner that evening, and so I ran up the stairs and I grabbed my camera and I got them to come out, and we videotaped this object for a while before it just vanished.
Yeah.
Well, we actually never made it to dinner that evening because of the incident, and my friend eventually went home about 11 o'clock, and I went to bed with an extremely bad headache. 2 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock at the door. And I got up. They must have been knocking for a long time because it woke me up. And I got up to answer the door, and I'm thinking, well, maybe my friend ran out of gas and had to walk all the way back, or maybe it was a neighbor who was drunk, forgot their keys. I wasn't sure, but by the time I got there, my sister had already opened the door. And there were 3, I thought they were young teenagers because they were small, very slender. And, I'm yelling at my sister, what do they want? My sister's standing there. No movement, no nothing, just standing there with the door open.
And are they still in the doorway?
And they're still in the doorway, and I got close to them, and I'm thinking, oh my God, these kids are wearing masks or something.
Yeah.
And the first thing I thought of is, they're going to rob us. Why?
Yeah.
Why the heck would they be wearing masks? I'm saying, don't let them in, they're going to rob us, don't let them in. And I'm rushing to the door, and as I get close, it's like, I step back because I saw that they weren't wearing masks. I could see the veins in their heads. I could see there was a female and 2 males, which is not typical of what you hear about ETs.
Okay, what can you describe what they looked like? Were they,
They were they weren't real small. They were about 4 foot something, almost 5 foot, not quite, maybe 4'3", 4 foot, I'm guessing, I'm not good with height. Very slender. I couldn't understand how they could hold up their heads because their necks were so skinny.
Right.
And there was a female, she had female parts, and 2 males. And I remember they were wearing this kind of baby blue, almost looked like, if you go to the Middle East, you see these outfits like they were in the Middle East, kind of, long robe kind of things. And they had very large, almond-shaped, slanted, wraparound, so blue they were almost violet eyes. The irises were just like I remember the woman having.
Yes, I was just going to say about that.
And but they had very sparse hair, huge heads. And I remember the woman stepped forward, and she had 3 fingers and a thumb, and her thumb was so long it was almost to the tip of her finger, and the palm of their hands were very long. And she grabbed my wrist, and I really don't know how to explain this, other than the fact a thought popped into my head. It's okay, it's going to be okay. And I'm literally screaming internally, but I couldn't do anything. Nothing would come out. And we lived in a 2nd-story apartment, and I remember she was leading me out to the balcony of this 2nd-story apartment. And I must have gotten frightened enough that I was able to do something. There was a male on either side of me, and she was leading me by my wrist, telling me it's okay, calm down, it's okay.
So where are they leading you away from the house at this point?
No, we were still in the apartment, but they were leading me to the sliding glass doors of the balcony. And I must have snapped out of this trance or whatever it was I was in, and I grabbed one of the males. I was going to chuck him. I was going to throw him off the balcony. And I felt a tap, just a light tap on the back of my head, and I woke up somewhere else.
Goodness. And what about your sister on that occasion? Was she also
She wasn't taken, but she remembers there were 3 people that came to the door.
Oh, so she has full memory of that.
But it's weird because her memory was 3 people in suits came to the door. There were 2 males and a woman, and they all wore pinstripe suits.
Oh, interesting. So what was? I mean, that was a heck of a thing. How did you come out of that? Did you wake up? Did you wake up in bed?
I woke up. I remembered everything, but and again, it wasn't sleep paralysis because I remembered everything. And that's the thing about the media, you know, they try to blow it off as a sleep paralysis, but it doesn't account for my experiences or Travis Walton or Betty and Barney Hills, who, you know, upstate New York.
On many people.
Exactly.
Many people.
And if you do any kind of research, you realize that at least 70% of the abduction experiences people have are while they are outside doing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I came back. When I came back, I was so freaked out. My brain couldn't handle it. It said, it has to be a dream. It has to be some kind of dream. So I got up, and my sister was already up, and I was wearing shorts, and I wasn't wearing a shirt. And I went to go make some eggs or pancakes or something, I don't remember. And my sister goes, "What the hell happened to your back?" And I went around, and I felt these holes in my back. I didn't feel any pain, but I felt with my fingers I had holes in my back. I looked down, and all the hair was rubbed off my wrists, and I had these sores on my wrists.
Right.
And then it all came flooding back, and I just kind of had to sit on the ground. So that's...
I mean, that's huge. That's just an enormous...
And that was nothing compared to the next few days. I literally, you know, I had to go to work. I had to do something. I had to pretend none of this happened. I had to be normal. So, you know, I tried to go about my daily, you know, routines and go to work. Mm-hmm. The only trouble is, who or whatever these things were didn't care if other people saw them, didn't care. They just didn't care.
Which is more unusual, isn't it?
It is. And again, that's what makes my story so bizarre, is most everything that happens with people around. Well, this particular incident, I was coming home from work, stopped to get gas, and I was driving during rush hour down a very, you know, busy road.
Is this sort of fairly recent as well after that?
This was just right after, you know, right after my abduction experience. And all of a sudden, you know, there was a guy tailgating me, and I was about to tell him he was number one, you know, because he was about to run into the back of me, and it was rush hour, and I was getting a little upset, you know what I mean? Sure. So all of a sudden, a beam of light hit the road right next to my car, my van.
On the driver's side?
On the driver's side. And it expanded out. No, actually it narrowed and looked like it came and went over my van. And because it's a big city, we have police helicopters there.
Yes.
And they have spotlights, and I'm thinking it's a police helicopter. So I roll down my window, and like any polite citizen, I'm waving at this thing. And I noticed the guy that was tailgating me had gotten out of his car and was stopped in the middle of the road going... And I was driving through an intersection. As I was driving through the intersection, people were just absolutely... They were looking above my van. Right. Completely freaked out. And I remember there's this one guy that was trying to get his car in reverse, and he looked absolutely terrified. He's sitting there going trying to back up. And so I looked up, in that same red blinking UFO that was over my work just before I was abducted had beamed my van in the middle of a very busy intersection in the middle of rush hour for hundreds, if not thousands, of people to see. Well, luckily, I still have my video camera with me, and we chased, this UFO went forward and slowly floated over this park called Old Stonehouse Park. There were tons of people there having parties and stuff, because it was, you know...
Had it still got the beam of light going?
The beam of light shut off, it just shut off. And, you know, I went and videotaped this object, and there were lots of people there with other video cameras and cameras, and... You know, one guy, you know, one of the witness reports said that this beam of light penetrated my van and hit the ground below like a hot knife through butter. Yeah. I don't remember that. I remember some weird static stuff.
Well, you probably wouldn't have seen it anyway, would you?
Yeah. Yeah, so, and, you know, just that's this kind of stuff that happens even now.
So, again, you know, did you by this time get people calling you saying, you know, neighbors, friends, hey, Stan, you know, what's going on?
I kept calling everybody, asking them, I've got to be crazy, I've got to be crazy, I've got to be crazy, help me, I'm going crazy.
I mean, did you tell your parents at this time?
My mom passed away in '91, but yeah, I tried to explain to my dad. My dad he didn't want to talk about it. Okay. My dad is, you know, he's in his middle 80s, and he, you know, he's still, I think he still has some, well, I know he still has secrets. And he you can tell he's concerned, but he just kind of tries to divert the subject.
So, okay, so we've had that incident, which is really huge, and you know, it must have been, you know, really something with the people seeing it as well, you know, really opening their minds to this sort of stuff. So what was the next major incident that began to really impact your life, and you knew that things were never going to be the same again?
Really,
because they haven't been, have they?
It just, the UFO stuff escalated and escalated and escalated. Eventually, I got married, and I moved to Nebraska to be with my new wife and her children, my stepchildren. And you know, you know, people following us escalated. We found more wiretaps on our phones. But there was an incident.
I was just going to say, just about the wiretaps. Did you know who that was? What
they never
agency?
told me. We actually found wiretaps in our house twice now. We found wiretaps in our house. One recently, one just last summer. But really, an event. Things already. At that point, how could you help not believing in this stuff?
Yeah, indeed.
But when I lived in Nebraska, we lived in Kearney, Nebraska, which is a college town. University of Nebraska is right there. Okay. And I have twin stepdaughters, very beautiful stepdaughters, and at the time they were young teenagers.
Yeah.
Well, I had gotten up to go get a drink of water. I was watching TV late night.
Yeah.
And I see a head pop down from one of the windows. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we've got a peeping Tom trying to get a look at my stepdaughters or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Went running outside, could never catch this guy. This went on literally for about 3 months. Called the police, all the neighbors knew what was going on. We set up traps underneath the window, so if this guy was there, we could, you know, hear it. And I had a bat by the door, so I could.
And had your daughters seen anything?
Just little movements of stuff. There, you know,
and
we
Lisa?
could hear stuff.
Yeah.
But not really. And eventually, one of the researchers involved in my case said, "Hey, Stan, you have a video camera. You have a Sony camera with night shot on it. Next time you see movement out of one of these windows, set up your camera toward that window, and maybe you'll catch this guy." Well, that's what I did. I set up the camera on night shot, pointed it toward that window, and I actually, there's a bathroom at the end of the hallway, you know, directly down from where the window was. And I was sitting on the bathtub waiting because I really wanted to catch this guy. And I saw 2 flashes of lights, and I looked out, and I swear I saw the guy, and I would go rush into the window. It's like, yes, I finally caught him. But when I looked out the window, I thought I was watching a child run toward the backyard until he turned around, and I realized that this child was not normal. And it scared the heck out of me. And you can actually go on to my website and see this video.
I think I have seen it, and I have seen it with the flashes of light. But it's a strange thing, isn't it, that these would engage in that kind of crazy activity, because clearly they don't need to be doing anything like that if they want to get your attention.
That's what you know, and a lot of the skeptics, I've gotten a whole bunch of, there are people that just tell me I'm full of baloney and I made it up and it's a mask, it's a costume. We've had that video analyzed by some of the top people in the world. It's all in camera. You can watch this creature blink and move its mouth, and you can see the infrared reflecting off its retina. And people always tell me, well, if the ETs are real, they come thousands of light years just to look in your window. That's ridiculous. Well,
it does sound crazy, because they're so capable of doing so much.
But it happens in most abduction scenarios. Children will usually, sometimes we'll see owls watching them through their bedroom window at night. Common. Yeah. And it's a common thing. In fact, I just talked to some people recently that had to talk to somebody about the experiences that they had when they were children, and they remember these beings watching them through their bedroom window.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, you'd assume that they wouldn't do that, but again, they are alien. We don't understand the way they think.
So let's go forward now, Stan, because I know this was troubling you and you wanted to get some answers. So what did you do to try and understand what was going on for you?
I was having a very hard time with this, to the point where they thought I was going to have a breakdown of some type. So the investigators, by this time I had some of the top researchers and scientists involved in my case, and they said, Stan, look, you got to go talk to somebody. And it's like, it's got to be a government thing. I kept trying to convince them that I was having experiments from some government experiment or something. And so eventually they hooked me up with a hypnotherapist, a local hypnotherapist in my area. And, she was well versed in the abduction scenario, and, they thought I would get help that way. Oddly enough, my case seemed to be fairly scary for this hypnotherapist, because during the regression, I started writing these weird symbols. I remember she asked me, do you remember anything, any weird signs, any symbols, anything? I said, yes, I have these strange symbols in my head.
I mean, had you had them in your head before?
Not before these experiences, no, but after I sure did. In fact, I had dreams about them all the time. So she gave me a pad of paper, and she gave me a pencil or a marker, and she said, can you write them down? I said, absolutely, I can. So I wrote these very complex equations down on this pad of paper within a matter of maybe 10, 15 seconds. And you have to understand it, again, like I said earlier, I'm extremely dyslexic. I had a very hard time in school. If I'm lucky, I have maybe a 4th grade math level.
Right.
And even being an international best-selling author, I can't spell very well. Thank goodness for editors and spell check.
Yeah, absolutely.
I fell apart in there, because I thought I had to have been going out of my mind, because normal people don't write this stuff down, and why was it in my head?
And did you know what it was?
I had no clue. She, however, had, some idea that it was something more than just nonsense, and she recognized some of the symbols, and so she sent these off to a Dr. Jack Kasher at the University of Nebraska.
And did she, just before we get to that, did she tell you what she thought those symbols were?
She didn't lead on, because she knew I was fairly upset. It wasn't until later that we found out they were actually very complex equations, one of which was an electron structure for an element that we didn't have at the time.
Okay. And do you know anything, have you been told what that element
Yes, it's element 115, which I later find
Bob
out,
Lazar element.
had a connection with Bob Lazar.
Okay.
And so 2 years later, somebody sent me a newspaper clipping. 2 years later, a Russian and a German scientist actually finally made this element 2 years after I had this equation.
So where are we in years? I've just lost track of where we are at this time when you're having the hypnosis.
This was like 2 years after my abduction.
So about
experience.
2002?
2003, I think.
So are you going through several hypnosis sessions at this time? Are you exploring it?
Well, the last hypnosis session I had with this woman scared her enough that she took me out of the regression. My wife was, she was my girlfriend, but she's my wife now. She was there at the time, and I had some more questions, and I wanted to find answers. And trouble is, in anybody that's gone through hypnotic regression, it's not what you think. It's not like they can control your mind. You remember most everything that happens. It's like you're in a deep daydream. Well, I thought I fell asleep. And when I came out, I apologized for falling asleep, except the hypnotherapist and my wife were sitting there going, and I knew something had happened, and they explained to me that my voice patterns had changed. My mannerisms had changed. It was like I wasn't me anymore.
Right.
And it scared the hypnotherapist so bad that she stopped the regression.
So, and what was it that was being said in this other
Not much
voice?
In this particular regression, not much at all. Eventually, I met a person named Dr. Leo Sprinkle.
Oh yeah, lovely.
Who is a wonderful man. He's a very dear friend now. But he agreed to kind of explore this. And so we had a appointment set up with him later on, and eventually the same thing happened, and this time he ran with it.
Great.
And
so what came from that?
Oh gosh,
experience?
all kinds of information, and I honestly, it's very hard for me to talk about because I really don't believe in that sort of stuff. I really don't believe in it.
So what is it that you don't believe in? Can you, I mean, without perhaps spending too much time going, can you just sort of the concept, basic
how do I
concepts?
explain this? When I went through the hypnotic regression process with Dr. Leo Sprinkle, I changed again. I thought I fell asleep.
Right. Okay.
My voice changed, my mannerism changed, and whatever this thing was that was now coming out of me had concepts of things that there was no way I could have understood. Used words, and luckily all my hypnotic regression sessions are videotaped because when I was done, some of the words this thing used, I had to look up because I didn't understand them.
So again, can you just run by some of the ideas that are so out there that
I've had about altogether probably about 18 to 20 sessions with whatever this thing is coming out of me. And again, I don't like to talk about it because I don't know if I have an altered personality that's coming through. I can't see that happening because this thing, whatever it is coming through me, can read minds. It has literally stopped phones from ringing and teleported the telephone from one side of a room, the building, all the way to the other side of the building through solid walls.
Yes. Yeah. I know of this phenomena too. It's happened in ancient times as well, and I think we're just because we're not educated that these things have been so. That
it's embarrassing to me because people, I'm getting over it, but going through the abduction scenario phenomenon is hard enough because you don't have anywhere to turn. Because not only do you have to deal with being frightened about what's going on from up above, you have to deal with the people ridiculing you. And,
yes. Yeah, I understand that. Which is why we've set up Ammach in the UK, so people can have a platform like this in which to share their experiences.
Which is wonderful.
And so many people haven't had that and don't have the respect. And what we're trying to bring is really raising awareness and to show people that that people like yourself have great integrity and authenticity. And why wouldn't we believe you if we believe people who give testimony in a court of law? What's the difference? And
I have so much evidence, it's unbelievable. I have trace evidence, physical evidence, photographic evidence, video evidence from very expensive surveillance equipment. Yeah. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I continue to write books about this stuff and talk at events, because somebody has to. Well,
I think this is the most important thing, as I think I said in our interview with Dr. Sprinkle, that's happening for humanity, and we have to get to grips with it. We can't keep hiding from this kind of stuff. So I just want to go back to your sessions with this being, speaking through you, and I'm also a therapist myself, and this happened with one of the people that I was working with, interestingly enough, and I'll tell you about that off camera sometime, but that absolutely, freaked me out. I was, not used to losing control with people I was working with either, and but what came from that was all very positive, but we're just not used to that, anything coming in and, being so different for us because we're just not educated. But anyway, so have you written up what those sessions were about?
I have, and I put it in a book called The Orion Regressions.
Oh, okay.
They told us where they're from.
Right.
He even explained how the moon was formed. All this scientific knowledge that is absolutely amazing. One of the physicists involved with my case, Dr. Claude Swanson, brilliant man, probably one of the top physicists in the country as far as I'm concerned. Actually had conversations with this being about physics and about, when he could get this being to answer, and a lot of times he'd say it was not important.
Right.
But when he could get him to answer questions, the answers were stunning, really very amazing.
Did this entity or being or intelligence come through with any kind of identity?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And can you tell if there is a
all
name?
All of it's in my book,
Okay.
you know. And what's interesting is they don't look at themselves as one, like I'm Stan. They always say we,
like
or
a collective.
us, more like a collective.
Yeah.
And from what we found out, they are involved with me all the time, guiding to help these particular beings are trying to help. I realize now there are multiple things here with multiple agendas. Even within my own experiences, I've had horrific experiences, and some that were almost angelic in nature.
Yes.
So that being said, I realize there has to be multiple things here with multiple agendas. Some really want to help us, but they can't get directly involved.
Okay, so what's your overall feeling? I know you said they want to help us, but how do you see your particular role in this? Because it's tremendous what you've been through and continue to go through, as I understand it.
It has, and I continue to go through it, but I look at things completely different now. For me, it's a spiritual journey. Once you get over the fear and you understand who humans really are, because humans have no idea who they are.
No, that's true. I'm still looking to find out who I am.
And I can tell you who humans are is amazing. The abilities they have that they don't know. They've been dumbed down over the years by the people who want to control the human race. And they don't need to. Once they realize who they are, things completely change.
Yes. Well, I think we're coming, I don't know about you, but I think we're coming to a point now, an apex where this is, cannot continue in the same way anymore.
Absolutely.
So how are you now living your life, Stan, with Lisa and your family? I don't know if your family, the girls, or
everybody that gets involved has experiences. It changes everybody.
How do your children feel about it? Or they're probably young adults now.
At first they try to ignore it because, especially young teens, early 20s, it's not cool to be weird. But everybody comes over to the house to experience stuff, so they don't have a choice.
Right.
And for all of us, it really is about helping the human race. That's all I want to do. I want to help, find some way to help wake up the human race. This is the most important thing in the history of mankind, and it's not fair that it's been kept from us. Not fair.
No, I totally agree with you. Absolutely believe it. So, apart from writing your books, what else are you doing to do your bit?
I'm speaking at these conferences. I'm speaking internationally, hopefully soon. Hopefully, I'll be in the UK.
Oh, great!
And we're working on that. I'm just spreading the word. That's all I can do. That's all I know how to do.
And what about Lisa? How is she managing? Because of course
she's managing me. That's a lot of work. I feel sorry for her. She's actually got a book, a brilliant book, and I got to say she's a better writer than I am. I've got 3 books out about the subject, but she's got a book called From My Side of the Bed, and it's from her perspective. She talks about the things I don't. She talks about the scary things, the sad things, the really absolutely outrageously funny things. She talks about the hybrid children and the 2 other women that are involved with this case and with me, and because we found out there are 9 hybrid children from these experiences.
From both of you?
One is from my wife. One is there are other women that are involved that we met by chance that I remembered being up there.
All right.
And they actually have come to visit and showed up at conferences and in front of...
You mean the women or the children?
The children.
The children.
The children.
Actually, I think I remember you. Yes, you pointed to a photograph, didn't you? In I can't remember which book it was.
Yes.
Yes, I remember seeing that.
And in fact, we just had a witness from one of the other events that I was at when some of these children showed up with hundreds of people to see.
I mean, do they come over to you and give you a hug and say hello?
Well,
Daddy?
no, it's not like that. They show up and they're kind of mysterious and they stay to themselves and they try to blend in. And I'll never forget this. We had some information that these children were going to show up at one of the conferences, Aztec UFO Conference, which I understand is no longer put on, but they let us know they were going to show up, and sure enough, they did. In this conference, of all things, this is a mystery, conspiracy in and of itself, was held at a Mason's lodge. So I'll never forget this Mason, this head Mason came up to me. He was crying and shaking because these children showed up in front of him. He saw these children with the huge eyes and the 3 fingers and the, you know, they were not altogether human, and all these
they
people
didn't just materialize. They
were physical and in front of everybody.
Right.
I was not there. I was getting dressed, and this one little girl came up to this woman and said, "Can you help me? I need to find my daddy." And she didn't know what to do. She was scared because this girl was not all human.
Yes. Yeah.
And she said, "I would like to give him a message," and left a message for me.
Can you share the message?
We're here to help. We're here to help the Earth. Tell my daddy I love him and I'll see him again.
And would you know where this race is from, what they're known as? Would we know them?
I would, but it's in the book. Okay. I'm not plugging my book. It's just I don't feel comfortable to, you know, just let it out, because it's about the journey, and there's a connection with the woman. I'll put it out there. There's a connection with the woman in my childhood also. Right.
Yes. Yes. Of course.
So, and when you read it in the book, it'll blow your mind. It will. This whole thing is absolutely mind blowing, and it's about. I realized through my experience, it's not just about these gray little beings or green little beings, whatever you want to call them, flying around in these shiny craft. It's about something more amazing. There is life throughout all aspects of existence, all the way up to what we call the angelic realms. There are beings up there they don't need physical forms. They're multi-level beings that can, penetrate time, space, as we know it. We aren't sophisticated enough to understand. Humans aren't altogether human. They are bits and pieces of something even more amazing.
I think that too. I absolutely agree.
And the presentation I do, I prove it. I prove these amazing abilities we have, and it usually just blows people away.
So, Stan, we're coming to the end of the interview, and it's been really interesting, and thanks for sharing. I know that people around will be fascinated. And just give us the name of your books, please. We'll start with that.
The first book that made me an international best-selling author is called Messages.
Yeah, that's the one I have.
It's a chronological order of all the things that happened, the connections to the military. I've got another book called Answers, which explains who humans are, explains. You have to understand, everything that are in these books really, really happened. And then I have another book out called The Orion Regressions, which we discussed.
With Dr. Sprinkle.
With Dr. Sprinkle. Wonderful. And my wife has a book out tying everything together called From My Side of the Bed.
Wonderful. And what's your website, Stan?
It's called, it's www.stanromanek.com. My wife's website is lisaromanek.com.
Okay, so what now, I don't know if you've got any other new things that you're about to be embarking on with these other beings, giving you some direction and guidance?
Absolutely. It's all about, I have no control over this. They do. There's a feature film coming out about my story. You can actually go online and see the clip. I believe it's a documentary feature film.
Okay. Do we know what it's called, or is it
called? It's called, I got to think about it now. How sad I don't remember the name.
Stan Romanek story.
You can find it online. You can find it online, because I really don't remember.
So when is that due for release?
Supposedly, they said it's supposed to come out in April.
Oh, great.
But, they told me it was supposed to come out in December, and it didn't either. Hollywood, they always tell you something. But we have had some opposition. There are people that, well, we all know who they are, that don't want this information out.
I was just wondering, just finally to wrap things up, how you've managed with that, because I know it seems to be a global phenomenon also, that anybody who has any real deep experiences always are harassed, always are followed. It's, the Men in Black show up. You haven't mentioned any Men in Black, but that seems to be also a very common scenario, and from the tapping and all the other surveillance. It seems that there is and it seems to be a military governmental connection on the not so great side of things, because they're certainly not sharing what they've found.
This message is for them also. I was told that I cannot exclude this from anybody, because it's just they're lost. They don't understand what they're doing. So my message, I want to reach them more than anybody else, because I grew up in the military. Not everybody in the military is horrible. I mean, there's some really amazing, enlightened people. I don't know if you met one of the people with us today is ex-naval intelligence.
No, I
The
haven't.
guy is incredibly enlightened. He realized that he needs to go a different direction in order to save this race.
Well, that's fantastic, Stan. And I just want to say once again, thank you very much. And
the name of the movie I just remembered is called Extraordinary, the Stan Romanek story.
that sounds good. That sounds good. Well, Stan, I hope that now we've had a link, we'll be in touch and remain connected. And when you come over to the UK, really look forward to seeing you. And just have to say, Miles Johnston, you've done it again. Magic Miles. Thank you very much.
You guys do nothing, I just sit here.
It's taken a lot for Miles to bring all this kit over here, everybody, and I just want to say that, you know, he's been hauling stuff around, up and down, getting a little bit grumpy with me now and again. Stan Romanek, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Great pleasure, and look forward to seeing them.
My parents are really going to give me away. So I calm down really quickly, and my mom just goes, well, I think guess we got to keep him. And then I remember seeing her again when I was 10.
And again, what were those circumstances?
I was on the swim team, and our house was adjacent to a park. And this park had a public swimming pool and a playground.
Yeah.
And I went up there early to practice. I was the only one up there, waiting for the rest of the people to come up to open the pool so I could practice. And I was literally laying on my belly, dragging my hands and feet in the sand, laying on the swing set.
Yeah.
And I hear somebody walking up the bike path or the path. And this woman sat 2 swings down from me. And I'll never forget this because she was asking me these really bizarre questions. She started out, are you having a good day? Yes. And
did you recognize her at this point?
I didn't look up. I wasn't
okay.
looking up. It was later it was later that I looked up, and she says, are they feeding you okay? Are they taking good care of you? And I'm thinking, who's she talking? And she was, talking about my parents.
Yeah.
Are you eating well? And, do you like swimming? And then she said something really bizarre. I'm seriously dyslexic, and I never really had a very good time in school. I didn't like school. I was bullied a lot because people thought I was, not very bright.
Yeah.
Which turned out to be the exact opposite, thank goodness. But she goes, I understand you're having problems in school, but don't worry, things will get better.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm thinking, who is this bizarre woman? And I look up, and she's wearing sunglasses, and she takes her sunglasses off. It's like, I know this woman from somewhere.
And are you now remembering that you've seen
and
her
I'm
a few
starting
times?
to remember that I've seen her from someplace. And she looked at me, and she said, you have something very important to do. You're one of us. We're one of you. And when she said that, her mouth wasn't moving. And it scared me so bad. I ran all the way home and told my parents I didn't want to go swimming. And I tried.
The Ammach Project.
her turn. Hey.
Hello, and we're here in sunny Arizona at the 22nd International UFO Conference, and we're here with my guest, Stan Romanek. Absolutely delighted to meet Stan. This is the first time I've read his book, but I want to hear a lot more. So Stan, over to you. Welcome to the Ammach Project.
Well, thank you for having me.
So Stan, I understand that your experiences began back in 2000, would that be right?
Technically, they really began when I was a child, but yes, they began in 2000.
Let's go back to the childhood experiences, because I really don't remember those from your writing. So let's go over those for the
Well, I grew up in the
viewers.
military. My father was had top secret clearance in the Air Force, and he was in charge or did something with missiles in the late 60s, early 70s. And in 1968, my father was involved in an incident where a UFO came down and armed, not disarmed, but armed one of the missiles at Minot missile base.
I haven't heard of that one before.
A lot of people haven't, but it's out there.
So just remind me the time again, 68, did you say?
1968, yes, 1968.
Actually armed it?
Armed it, yes. I was 5 years old at the time.
Okay.
Now, they tracked this UFO from Minot to Grand Forks, then from Grand Forks to our small town in Northwood, North Dakota, where we were living at the time. We didn't live on base. And I remember when I was little, a strange woman approached me, and very stunned. Even as a child, I thought she was very pretty.
Yeah.
Except her eyes were bizarre. She had very huge, almond-shaped, so large, they didn't fit. Her eyes were so large, they didn't fit. And they were so blue, they were almost violet eyes.
And where was she? Where were you when you met her?
I was outside playing. I had this little pedal car that I was, well, first when I was 5, then when I was 8, then when I was 10.
And was it always in the same sort of situation where you were on your own without your parents?
Always. No, actually, she showed up. I remember my father was transferred from the missile base in North Dakota to Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I remember we were Christmas shopping or something, or looking for Christmas wrapping or boxes, or I'm not sure. And there was a woman that seemed to be following us a lot down there. And
do you remember her as the same woman that
well,
you've seen?
I remembering her from somewhere.
Right.
And she wore glasses, which I thought was odd because it was snowing outside, but she wore sunglasses.
Oh, okay.
And we were about to get into the car, and I was having a temper tantrum because I wanted to go home. I didn't want to go. I thought I was really bored and tired and wanted to go home. And I remember my parents had an old Studebaker, and the seats pushed forward so you could get into the back, to the back of the car. And my mother was sitting down and leaning forward so we could get in the back of the car. My sister was already getting back in the car, and my mom was yelling at me because I was just being a brat. And this woman came up and she says, what a wonderful, wonderful little boy you have. And my mom looked at this woman going, really? Because I was having a temper tantrum. And, I remember she took off her sunglasses, and my mother's reaction was like, oh my God.
Really?
This is not,
Did you see that?
Yeah, I remember that specifically, and I remember thinking, those are really strange eyes, but as a child, you don't put two and two together.
I mean, did your dad see that as well?
Oh, yeah. And then I remember thinking, I know this woman from somewhere, but I couldn't remember from where. And, my mother just jokingly, after she got over the shock of seeing this really bizarre-looking woman, said, yeah, well, we're thinking of giving him away, because I was, of course, being
horrible.
Being horrible. And the woman goes, well, if you're giving him away, I'll take him. Serious. I thought she sounded serious, and I'm going, oh my God, playing with this little metal pedal car. And she walked up the street, up the sidewalk, and she ruffled my hair, and she said, you're very special. You have something very important to do when you grow up. And I remember she opened the palm of her hand, and she had this marble, this blue glowing marble that started to float about a 1/4 inch off the palm of her hand. And just as she did that, I heard my mother yelling out the kitchen window at me, saying, Stan, what are you doing? And I turned around, and my mother was coming out the door because this strange woman had approached me.
Yeah.
And the woman, when I turned around, the woman was already, you know, halfway up the sidewalk, walking away. And at the time, I didn't realize there was any connection until 2000, jump ahead to 2000. I had my first UFO sighting. And I met this woman online. She's now my wife, but we became very good friends, and I wanted her to come visit me in Colorado. She lived in Nebraska, and I lived in Colorado, and I thought, you know, I'm going to go up to the mountains of Colorado, videotape the area, send her some chocolates and you know, a bottle of wine or some little care package. And on my way to videotape, you know, the mountains, there were cars pulled over the side of the road, approximately 30 to maybe 50 cars pulled off to the side of the road. Yeah. And they were looking south above some power lines. Okay. And as I'm driving, I'm looking to see what they're looking at. I thought at first it was a hot air balloon and realized it was actually a UFO. And I had my video camera, got it out, because I didn't believe in this stuff, and I'm pretty sure.
Yes, I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I actually captured something so I could show people to say, hey, look, I had this government experiment captured on film, because I really didn't believe in UFOs.
So can I, just before we go further into that story, can I just take you back to your childhood?
Sure.
So had you, from that time, since you were 5 years old, back in 68,
yes.
Are we in 68 with the lady?
Yeah.
Okay, was there anything that came out from that incident, any further experiences?
I realized she had followed me. She showed up again throughout my life.
I wondered that.
She showed up again when